Fazal, thank you so much for being here. It's been great to get to know you over the last few months. You've worked in some really incredible companies, from big machines to Oracle to Workday, and now you've co-founded Logik. You're a product leader, you're a founder. Can you just tell us a little bit about your career journey and the steps along the way?
Sure. And thanks, Vin, for having me over. It's always fun to talk to fellow founders and serial entrepreneurs. Just a bit about myself. I started working at big machines. Originally, actually, I'm from India, so I did my undergrad in computer science in India. Worked in India for a few years in a smaller company, but which was more application server platform as a developer, and then came to US to start working for a company called Big Machines, which, unlike the name, was actually a tech company. It wasn't in machinery, but much more to do with SaaS. Other in 2000 founded company, so in the dot-com era founded company of SaaS, which actually lived through the dot-com bubble. And it was in a new category defining space called CPQ. And I started there working as a developer, as a dev lead, dev manager, kind of on the dev track. And over time, kind of got interested more in the business. And more importantly, it was like, I understand what I have to do, but I don't understand why I have to do it. And that curiosity of why I have to do it was what pulled me into product management. So I kind of shifted over more on the product management, functional architecture side. And just around that time, we got acquired by Oracle. So I went to Oracle kind of through an acquisition phase. And at Oracle, had good time to understand what it means to be part of a company with 100,000 plus employees, how the large scale things work. And I got to operate as a leader of the Oracle CPU Cloud, both in product and architecture for a while, working with leaders at Oracle. Learned quite a bit, and also learned quite a bit why I think I like smaller companies. And as a result, when I was thinking I wanted to kind of explore out, I started exploring and expanding myself from more sales applications, which is where CPQ plays, so in more CRM, order management, and order capture kind of a space, to more financial application space. So I wanted to understand a well-rounded sense of the business. So I went to Workday to lead part of their product management for adaptive financial cloud, or a financial planning cloud, as they call it, doing workforce planning, some of those things for a couple of years. And then got the opportunity to start Logik back in the space of CPQ, but with a twist. So we kind of founded Logik on that thesis, and that's where we are today.
So good. It's such a rich story. And you've seen enterprise software just evolve in just, like, I'm sure, fascinating ways over the last 20, 25 years, 15 years, whatever it is. I'm curious, could you talk about the inflections or the big changes that are operating, that are at play, that you are thinking about, that you're most interested in as you go and build Logic?
Sure. Yeah, I think we are living in an exciting time. Some people are comparing it to the dot-com era, though I personally think it is slightly different. But there's a lot of new tech wave coming in. I think everybody by now probably is aware of AI. Even my parents back in India are aware of companies like NVIDIA and OpenAI. So that tells you how much AI is uh, got into the imagination of the popular culture, and it has some meaningful impact. So it would be wrong not to say that definitely AI is a trend which everyone is looking at, and we are looking at it too in our own way, and we've already done some work in that area. But when I look at more broadly on why the trends which are exciting me more in our space, where we are more closer to the space as well, not just macro, I think we are seeing a lot more change in the buyer's sentiment and expectation happening. So as the digital economy, quote unquote, matures, people kind of got, or companies got, things which were low hanging fruit, somewhat slightly better than low hanging fruit online, and transacting digitally those products online, right? And that's a business, B2C, business to consumer, kind of picked up a lot, and a lot of simple things you can buy online nowadays at Amazon and everything store and every other place across the world. I think the B2B companies obviously are more complex and generally are behind the trend a little bit compared to B2C in that sense, just because experimentation is more expensive and requires more thinking. I think we see a shift in B2B now to have more flexibility conversations. They want to be more like B2C. And that's changing one aspect. The second aspect, I think, is partly COVID triggered, but partly I think the e-commerce wave triggered with maturity of e-commerce is the idea that users want to transact with you not just in one way. So whether I want to buy something from an Instagram ad, whether I want to buy something from the store, whether I want to buy something from your website, or whether I want to buy something from a distributor, all of that can happen in B2B space as well. And consumers expect or buyers expect that it should be easy, it should be frictionless, right? That I think is a major change. And last but not the least, I think this is more financial but more technical. If you think about SaaS companies, I think there is a era of change happening in SaaS on selling licenses and just doing some sort of fixed deals to more consumption based. So there's a lot more interest in customers paying for what they use. Obviously, hyperscalers like AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft, they've kind of encouraged, and customers were not comfortable. I remember back in the day with usage-based pricing because they wanted to predict. They still want to predict, but I think there's a level of maturity and comfort with the idea that you can buy as you go and only purchase what you will consume. And that's creating an interesting dynamic for the SaaS companies, which have to think about how to actually create metrics for that, how to sell that, and build a go-to-market for it.
It's super interesting. And that was going to be my next question, because it sounds like one of the major inflections that you're thinking about is, maybe for lack of a better term, the consumerization of enterprise software. The consumer is expecting more flexibility from the vendor. It looks a lot more like B2C, even though it's B2B. What are B2B software companies having to do operationally to support that demand from the customer? And you mentioned usage-based billing. That sounds like one really good tangible example of that.
Correct. Yeah. So usage-based billing, I already touched upon. There are a couple of others also, which I think are important to know. So one of them is I'm obviously a techie at heart, so I always look at the technology landscape. I think it's surprising how uncommon cloud native actually still is in more B2B landscape. So I look at obviously our landscape, our competitors, both large and small companies. There are a lot of companies which are cloud hosted. Not all companies are cloud native. And it's a subtle distinction which over time becomes more prominent because, as I said, people want similar experiences, composable experiences across any channel. Slapping it together is possible, but doing it meaningfully in a way it meets that consumerized trend is actually really hard. So customers do not want to wait for 5 seconds for an update button to do something, which is still so common that you will be shocked sometimes how all these big, very respectable softwares are working, right? So making those changes require you to think about cloud native, which I think is still happening more meaningfully now in B2B. That's one of the trends. And I think the other trend, which is meaningful, as I already mentioned, I think the way SaaS applications are being architected with other technologies, AI being definitely one of them, right? So the ability to interact in conversational manner, ability to see insights. I don't need to do things which I'm doing repeatedly. Like that's sort of a trend, right? That requires you to start thinking of technologies which probably enterprises ignored for a while. It's not like they didn't exist. It just wasn't seen as something they needed to do. And it was more based on, I just need to put the right controls to influence the right behaviors in my team rather than what my customers want to do and how they want to interact. So instead of just buying for us, as we say, most companies keep selling a bag of parts, not solutions. And customers don't think in terms of, I want to buy this part number. They think about, I want to solve this problem. When you start changing that mindset, suddenly the need to build solutions and architecting them in a different way so that they can scale, they can be flexible, I think is where I see also a lot happening in the SaaS space.
It's really good. One thing that kind of is apparent is that there's a ton of pressure on companies to evolve how they think about monetization.
Mm-hmm.
And that's driving, I think, a lot of innovation into the stack. I mean, you're seeing a lot of new billing tools. You're seeing, new approaches to CPQ. You're seeing kind of a lot of people think about like, what does quote to cash look like in the future broadly. Maybe kind of, in light of all that, can you talk a little bit about Logic and
Sure.
the insight behind Logic? What do you guys see, and what is the vision of the business?
Sure. Thanks for asking. As you can imagine, as a co-founder, I love to talk about Logic, so I appreciate getting that opportunity. But Logic, as you said, when you look at broad code to cash space, I'll probably first tell you we are trying to remove the idea that this is code to cash, and let me tell you why. So when we think about the trends in the market, the trend of the word code, rightly or wrongly, gets too much associated with the channel of selling, which is the sales or resellers or partner based selling approach. But it doesn't capture how a buyer on with self service wants to also buy, right? So when you think about the trend of self service or all the buyers, it's almost like I want to capture need to cash. So
Hmm.
it's my own way of thinking about it, but it's like wherever the need is, you're trying to capture the need in the way which is most meaningful in that given channel, and then making sure that transaction happens smooth. So that little twist itself is one of the reasons why Logic is in the existence. Because when we looked at how companies want to do e-commerce with existing CPQ tools, and honestly, I've done it. I've seen what it looks like, and it can work, but it works in a very fractured manner. Definitely not how the buyers and the users are expecting it to. So just putting it together, maintaining such a system is such a hassle. It is not built by for the administrators to actually maintain it for multiple channels. It doesn't scale for e-commerce. It feels like you're putting together a legacy software. If you've ever bought insurance, if you imagine, there are sometimes you see screens which you're not even sure how are they existing in this era, right? So, and that is happening in many of these CPQ tools when they are being exposed in those self-service trends. So that is one of the key reasons why we looked at Logic. The second part was, given our history, that is somewhat of a advantage I do think we had, because we've been in this space. Our founders, other founders, have been pioneers of this space who kind of created this category. So we have the ability to influence enterprises in the way which sometimes for not every, it's not possible for every startup, right? There is some information relationship advantage which allows us to have those conversations with customers, and their trust is there for us to do that. And last but not the least, which is a little bit philosophical but not completely wrong, at least in my opinion, I think we see a bigger trend if I look specifically at e-commerce and more broader market. More broader economy wants to make all products being sold online, and that includes a lot of complex products, complex solutions. So people are willing to buy cars online, which is fairly complex. People buy laptops online, but now people want to buy things even from Nvidia online, right? Given the demand right now, they do want to put together a solution. And if you think about NVIDIA, it's not just a chip, it's a full scale server for you to host your AI workloads. When you think about buying such products online in your own self service manner, in my humble opinion, I don't think any platform today, no matter how respectable in a technology sense, has focused on that problem. So I've seen trying to buy, I went for a ski trip recently, trying to buy for my family all the ski gear for the first time skiers. And it was so painful to go through first the sports warehouses to know what are part numbers I want, then going into Amazon, trying to put in those part numbers took me about 90 minutes to do that. And when you think about a buyer, it's like, I know the use case. I have a kid of this age. I can tell you how big or small it is, what kind of experience I'm looking for. Give me a suggestion on what I want. That's not what the recommendation engines are doing today. They are just telling me if you look for part X, you may want part Y. They're not telling me you want this solution. These are the possible parts which meet your need. And that actually is a big reason why we think Logic should exist, because we know how to solve that problem. We are focused on that problem, and we can bring that meaningful change in the market with our solution.
Really good. Makes total sense. I want to kind of get a sense from you on something. It feels like there are kind of three really core pillars of complexity that B2B businesses like Logic are thinking about and working to support. And pillar number one is a customer that wants to buy in a variety of ways. Pillar number two is a customer that wants to be billed potentially in a variety of ways, maybe on usage, maybe on something like seat, could be a hybrid. And pillar number three might be kind of a very inevitable evolution towards multi-product offerings, where a customer might want a portion of your offering. I guess my first question is, do you think those are those the correct pillars, that would be useful for operators to internalize, as this is how we should kind of think about architecting around this complexity? Or are there others that I may have missed?
No, I think you're spot on. Especially, I think the way you translated to the three pillars, I think those actually sort of set the foundation on how we are meeting this trend in the market. So for all the trends, we said, well, multiple channels, buyers want what they want, their expectations are different, they want that flexibility, bringing these more complex solutions online. I think they all highly correlate to how do you actually introduce your products in a commercially viable manner in these different channels, which means you need to have that flexibility of packaging your own offerings in a way which is more flexible and needs to be dynamic, right? It needs to keep changing. That is very important. And you have to support all those different monetization schemes, which means you even want to make more slicing and dicing than we would have wanted before. I mean, one simple example is, as I look at our Cosmo AI platform, so we have an AI platform we have built from ground up. There are different ways to monetize even within that platform, depending on what need I'm serving. So if I'm serving the need of the end users in an e-commerce environment versus I'm serving need of my administrator who's setting up the environments, how that offering should be made more meaningfully available to the user is important. You can't just say I'm going to charge per user. I think many companies try to do that and they realize it's not enough, right? So you need that flexibility, which means I want to learn, I want to change, and I want to make it available in a way that the buyer feels important, like they feel compelled to buy. And at the same time, if you think about it, we are all in the business of, uh, making sure that we are applying the capital and we are getting the right amount of money to keep scaling the business. And if you kind of don't get that equation right, you can't do all the big things and the good things you actually want to do. So getting this right actually is very important for exactly the three reasons you said on how you have to do it.
Could you maybe speak to how you have built and architected for that flexibility at Logik?
Sure. So I don't think my answer will be that impressive, which probably will tell you how complicated it gets. So the reality is, yes, this is a problem which we see every day as in product when working with sales and engineering constantly. And I don't think it is an easy solution, even as a startup or as a big company. And I've seen in both arenas to actually solve this problem correctly. So what we have done is probably similar to what many people have done. So we kind of do trial and error. So you discover this problem or this new thing has to be done. We'll engage our engineering team to say, okay, let's figure out what you want. We'll engage with our sales team, try to translate between the two, and come up with the best solution we think we can live with. Although we know it is less maintainable, it's going to be less flexible, we just compromise and say, okay, I think we can put this out there and we'll somehow measure it and make sure that it can be audited correctly. So it's a constant in creativity you have to apply every time you're talking about a model, and you just hope it doesn't become such a big ball of maintenance nightmare over time. Or what happens eventually is, for 3 4 years down the line, you realize this has become too much, then you go through another refactoring project to get to the next stable point, which is again not great, but buys you 3 years more. And
Yeah.
I think that's the trend which, unfortunately, even we are solving a lot of problems. That's not the problem which we have solved fully. Now, yes, we have different services. It's from ground up a cloud native application. So there are some things we can put in place, but just maintenance wise, I wouldn't rate our solution as like, oh, we figured out this puzzle right now.
Well, and it's really such a systems question, right? It's like multiple systems interacting, and often sort of bespoke ways that have a lot of kind of custom glue code, for lack of a better word, sort of involved. And to whatever extent you feel comfortable, like, I'd love it if you could just explore like what your systems look like, because I think a lot of operators, especially product leaders that are in kind of thinking about monetization, are always wondering about this, because it doesn't feel like there's a pattern. And so you end up, for example, with customers coming in, self-serve customers coming in from Stripe, and direct sales customers coming in from a CPQ product or your CRM, and maybe NetSuite is involved, and then maybe you're trying to kind of like manage config and a policy file in the application. And so like I often hear just like a real frustration from product leaders that think about monetization, that there is no standard. And I wonder if you could kind of talk about just the way your systems look at a high level, the systems that govern monetization.
Sure. So I think, as you very rightly said, as you think about the actors involved in this case, the systems actually multiply with the actors involved in true reality. So when I look at, let's say, Logic and how we are trying to do it, we obviously are trying to have some sort of a place for definition of what monetization we want to do, right? And that's going to be closer to where the sales applications are working. So if you think about the CRM systems in place, which we are using, some of the marketing systems in place, which we are using, and our best friend, Microsoft Office, Excel, PowerPoint, actually are the systems where some of that definition is happening. Then you think about the execution part of it, which is, well, how do you realize this? That probably tells you another story of complexity and somewhat of a future nightmare. So we are an application which is, a microservices. You can imagine like a cloud native stack, which means as we think about implementing and executing such monetization models, it is fairly scattered on where some of this management will happen. Now, there is some, as good development teams, typically good developers, what they do is they've created common libraries, they've created some common control panes, as you call them, where we can have the common property files for a very loose way to look at it, right? Like those property files, you can have those common data stores where some of this information is going, which is being propagated across the application. And then every application service is trying to figure out, okay, what did I agree to? Then that's what we are implementing. And let's hope we all got it right in this game of Chinese whispers. So that's the second system. The third system, which I think in most companies lacks, big and small, and I don't think we have also figured it out yet, is the visibility to the buyer system. So there is always an exercise which you have to do. Buyers obviously demand that, okay, what I purchased is what I'm being charged for, right? And how do you provide that audit capability? So then there is a whole bunch of an integration from these dev systems to the e-commerce systems, or the where the buyers are engaging with us. It could be to the CRM systems to push some data, do some analytics on it, and push out those reports, right? And again, our friend Excel could be one of the answers which will keep happening. And that actually is the case. And that, I think that's part of the problem, I think, Finn, which you kind of you mentioned, right? When we think about complexity, so part of it is systems problem, which is why this is scattered. Part of it is actually a people's problem, with all due respect. So the reality is there are the definition and the execution is controlled by two very different entities. If you think about sales and engineering, right, or go to market team and engineering technical teams, they both have to work on this together. But as you know, typically what happens is who one side is going to try and control that more, and I see that happen differently in each company depending on the leaders and the leadership qualities and leader traits, right? And that creates another kind of a dynamic, because then enterprise vendors who have tried to solve this problem in entitlement systems and others, it always becomes a struggle because you don't know who is holding the source of truth. And it should be answerable, but we as a human race are fairly messy people. We don't always agree to what might be what each person thinks what is right is different. And I think that creates another layer of complexity in solving this problem, at least in my opinion.
It's so true. I mean, every organization I've been in, there are multiple sources of truth. There's like the source of truth for finance, the source of truth for sales, the source of truth for product engineering. This has been such a good conversation. I think it's going to be incredibly useful for operators. I really appreciate you doing it. I hope we can do it again. Where can people find you and learn more about you or learn more about Logik?
Sure. No, I'm always happy to engage with people, whoever at least is interested in some of these topics and e-commerce or Logic.io. So you can always reach me through LinkedIn. I'm fairly responsive if people find me. Thankfully, my parents named me in a way which is somewhat unique, so you can easily find me on LinkedIn. And also, if needed, I'm always happy to get emails at Fazal at Logik.io. And you can reach out to me if you want to learn more, and if you think Logik can help. We are definitely very engaging, and we care about our customers. That's what our customers tell us. So go to logik.io and see our references. And if you want to learn more, reach out to me.
Perfect. Thank you again, Fazal.
Thanks, Vin. Nice talking to you.